So Jimmy talked a lot about new features within GA4 and new approaches, and a lot of the themes and talks and presentations that we've had today have focused on that as well. New changes, new paradigms in the industry, new technologies, new strategies, new things that we should be testing. But whenever we have something that is new, it brings a lot of organizational challenges as well. There is the transformation. There is determining what new things to test, how to measure success, and to really get to a place that we need to be, it can be very, very complex. So in our final session here today, wanted to kind of bring that perspective from the enterprise. What is it like trying some of these new approaches? What are some of the new things that are really being embraced? And so to discuss that, I am thrilled to announce our final panel. Courtney Fenstermaker, manager of the D2C industry team at InfoTrust. Mariam Giorgadze, product manager, MarTech and CRM at Tory Burch. And Shimi Neuwirth, Director of BI and Analytics at Adorama. So yes, please welcome them all. Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
All right. First, want to say amazing job, Lucas, with those three names.
Exactly.
We're going to make it easy for you. Yeah, so we are the last session for today. So I know absolutely no one in this room is thinking about happy hour in 30 minutes, but we're excited to share some very practical advice and thought from two leaders in the industry. So I guess where we'll start out, if you guys can just maybe share a bit more about your background and your role in your organization. I think that would be helpful for everyone here to have that context.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. I always start by saying that I have a very unusual role. I was just mentioning to others in the room as well that I've never really met anyone who does product management of MarTech. And even when I started at Tory Burch, it was quite like, oh, like this is going to be easy. But I think it gave me a really interesting framework of like how to look at MarTech, how do you prioritize and really look at your tech stack from like company priorities perspective and the outcomes you're driving, which wasn't really the framework that I used to before. I consider myself to be a geek. So I was like, ooh, like new shiny technology. So what do we do with this? But to give a little more background, I started out a few years ago more of like with the focus on digital analytics. So like tracking and understanding like digital behavior and how people buy and what they buy and what are the signals that they give was my focus. Then I kind of moved into more like how do I connect this to on a customer level, and like CDPs came on board and so on. And then today it's a little bit all over the place, I would say. I think Tyler's slide like really wraps up what my day-to-day life looks like. It's craziness, but today's topic is what I pretty much like live with every single day. So that's been fun so far.
Cool. And I am the Director of BI, Business Intelligence and Analytics at Adorama. We're an online electronics retailer. I came up with in the world of digital analytics back in I think it was mentioned today, the web trends days and, Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics, and my role kind of morphed into more of a global, more of a macro role in analytics, and that is business intelligence, setting up. I kind of got a kick out of the first presentation of the day, looking at all those visualizations. When I started on this initiative of building a business intelligence program, people were looking at PDF printouts of just tables, and here I am trying to introduce just charts and things like that, and they're like, what is this? So my role today is more focused on kind of the company-wide analytics and BI, but obviously still owning the digital analytics piece and the tagging and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, always fun stuff. So if we start out maybe a little bit broader, would you mind both of you sharing your perspective on what transformation really means in this privacy-centric world that we're living in and how you've experienced that firsthand?
I think it's a big word. And when I hear the word transformation, it's like always like you got to be doing something like crazy and innovative and like the shaking of the organization. I would say maybe one key thing that we've changed in my organization that I would actually highly recommend to everyone, and it was kind of mentioned today earlier when the Privacy-Centric panel was on. The nature of my role is that I have to bring in everyone into the room when we are building a new product and the solution, right? And the best way to do it is really not just to work with the business team and be like, so what do we need? Like, what outcomes do we want to drive? And once we have everything ready, like go to the tech and say like, now build me this, or go to the vendor and say, give me this. It's really like involving the tech team like earlier on in the conversation. The same thing goes to the privacy team. Yeah. And one of the things that I'm really proud of that we've done is we are still going through the transformation in terms of the technology. How do we like encrypt the data? How do we use it in a more privacy-centric way? How do we collect it in a more privacy-centric way? So on and so on, like every area. But process-wise, it was amazing to see like what it did for us when we actually, in the very early on in the conversations, we had someone from our data and privacy team present in the conversation, where we helped them kind of like get educated around like, hey, we're building this new experience. This is what we want it to look like. This is where the concept is. This is what we think the benefit will be for the customer. And then as we continue moving these conversations along with the tech team, like have them always present. And I think the other important thing, second actually, that I would say, today when we're building the solutions, we have like a regular, what we call like architecture review, kind of like a board in the meeting. And our privacy team is always there to look at like how are we building the infrastructure and what data we're working with, like how are we moving it from one system to another, how are we activating it, and just having them there from the very beginning really changed everything. And I don't remember who it was, but someone mentioned like when you build everything, like at the end, don't ask us like are we good from privacy perspective? Like having them early on in the conversation really saves a lot of time.
From my standpoint, I think the word transformation is kind of awareness, like a big awareness movement for consumers. It probably started, I guess, with GDPR 5 years ago. Maybe even started before that. Maybe Edward Snowden is responsible for this, but it's really kind of just brought much more awareness to the consumer as to what's going on online. And the truth is, I think there's probably a large percentage of consumers that even now don't really understand it. But that's becoming, I think that's kind of the transformation that we're going through and will continue to go through. From an advertiser's standpoint, it's been covered a little bit today, I think. It's not like the end of the world. I think, maybe it's easy for me to say because I'm not the one building the solutions, but the big boys are building solutions. There are solutions already in place today that's been discussed today, and I'm curious to see how the Google Privacy Sandbox will solve these problems. But we've been through transformations before, and I think this is just another kind of bump in the road, and we'll just change the way we do things. But measurement will still be there, attribution will still be there, advertising will still be there. That's what pays for the internet. That's where value is created with customers providing their information to us. It's just about being responsible with how we use it, and I think it's kind of a course correction, but it's not kind of a end of the world scenario.
Yeah, I think even just from talking to you earlier, transformation can be such a big word and it's overwhelming, but just those small steps towards it is, I think, something that both of your organizations have done well to just take it day by day and, like you said, not act like the world is burning down because we're going through a change in the industry. So maybe just a bit more on a tactical level then, what are some of the activities that you've been investing in or looking at that is just in that mindset shift of a more privacy-centric organization?
I think on a tactical level, there are a lot of things we still need to do, but where I would say because of the nature of my role, I am focusing on for sure is educating our strategy teams as well and helping them work closely with our data and the privacy teams. And here's what I mean by it. Like, we went from being an organization where we'd literally have like printouts of customer emails for some of our in-store campaigns We're from like now looking at like how do we architect this data and how we orchestrate it in a way that from that centralized, however we can unify that data, like that centralized mode of the customer data, we can send it to our store, send it to our CRM teams or others to like really action upon it, but remain very respectful of the customer. And I think it comes down to tactical, like very simple things as well. Like when we're building like some of the solutions, like, you know, the teams have like, oh, just give me the customer data. I'm going to send it to this platform and they're going to send it here. And like, this is what we're going to do, like segmented messaging, fantastic. But there are so many things that they need to think about. And education is really what it comes down to. Like, great, you can do that. You can send that segmented message. But like, when you're sending it to the other system, like, does that system like really have the like a capability to encrypt that data, to be respectful of our data? Is it going to be like any leaks or anything? Like just having the strategy teams like think about it in that terms, like driving the conversations that way. Like I think it's been huge for us. And like I mentioned before, like technically one of the biggest things that we're undertaking this year actually is like we're building our own kind of platform, which is, to explain it shortly, like it's very much like a CDP. Where we're creating a whole strategy of like how do we encrypt the data wherever we ingested it, and how do we send it to the other systems for activation in a way that we don't necessarily sacrifice on the benefits of the activation, and we can still get good conversion and revenue, but we remain very respectful of our customers' data. So I could go on and on, but these would be my key things that I would want everyone to take away.
Yeah, so we invested in a CDP as well, back a couple of years ago. So from that standpoint, I think we're kind of setting ourselves up for future success. We're collecting data from various sources, using it for site personalization, and as well as activating, you know, marketing audiences off of it. So I wouldn't say we're fully there yet, but we've definitely made, you know, good strides there. And then, you know, tactically, I mean, we're also, I wouldn't say we're at a point where we are making day-to-day decisions differently. I think our marketing programs are kind of running as usual, but we are doubling down on certain things that'll help us collect more first-party data. For example, our loyalty program. We've really dug in our heels on our loyalty program, revamped it now, created kind of a 3-tiered program. Again, just, you know, collecting better first-party data and being able to draw in more customers that way, bring in more customer data that way, and that's first-party data is king, right? So we're definitely, you know, making strides there, but we probably have some room to grow as in terms of a process standpoint, kind of doing things differently with privacy in mind. We don't have a privacy officer per se, but, you know, kind of winging it and getting more awareness as time goes on.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you hit on loyalty program, which ties in with a lot of the conversation throughout the day around how to collect and identify users through that first-party data mechanism of how can we get that information in a way that adds value to the customer and isn't just we need your data, but we want a value exchange. So I think that's been a tactic, especially in the retail, e-commerce, direct-to-consumer space that I'm in every day. I see that growing. I think, Mariam, you also had shared loyalty program was something that was really key to a strategy for Tory Burch as well. So I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to share on specifically that or anything else that you both are doing to just continue to gather more first-party data. I think that's a big one that everyone's trying to figure out.
I think just one thing that I would add to that is, you're right, like it is important for us to build out that loyalty program, but unfortunately we're nowhere near where we want to be. One of the things that we have been kind of thinking through, and we still haven't formalized our approach and the strategy to it, is we have a very standardized way of like collecting some of that private information, like more like PII, across different systems, but it's just more of like this whole concept of identity that we have, right? Like how do we give this back to the customer in her hands, and we don't make any assumptions of who she is, how she wants to interact with us, like how do we build that loyalty program for her, how do we encourage her more to engage with us on a continuous basis and keep her interested in us. And like that is what we call internally kind of like an operational customer view, where she gets to say and she gets to tell us what she wants, who she is, and how we should be viewing her. It's like a really an interesting concept that we have not quite, I guess, like materialized in a certain sense, but that is something that we definitely want to focus on as a company and like have a very strong strategy around that, which is built on being privacy-centric and respectful of the customer.
I mean, that value proposition is that is certainly, that's a tough one, right? Because do you go with 10% off on your next order, or is that too cheesy and you're just trying to, or do you give long-term value? And that's kind of stuff that we're testing as well. What types of perks to offer with our various levels of loyalty?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe shifting gears, and actually, Shimi, you had just mentioned it maybe a few minutes ago. One of the buzzwords that we hear a lot, I've actually heard from many of you just floating around and talking to different people here, is attribution. And how, with the depreciation of third-party cookies, what is that going to look like, and how do we adjust to those changes? So how are you guys thinking about attribution?
So, I mean, my feeling on attribution, I've been kind of working with, kind of thinking about attribution and the best way to do it for years. And I don't think anyone's really mastered it. I think we would all agree that what we do is kind of directional, and that's the best we can hope for. With the best attribution, multi-touch attribution solutions out there, you're not going to be able to stitch together every user and understand a full user path. Directionally, you hope you're making good spend decisions based on the data we have. So, I mean, and now with third-party cookie loss, obviously it's going to be even, more negatively affected. My thinking has been over the past couple of years, and this is something we're talking about as an organization, is to move more towards incrementality testing, understanding how each campaign is doing, these A/B testing, holdout tests, geo tests, rather than trying to tell a full story of this is exactly what happened with this user and now we know how to optimize our spend. Kind of really just getting an understanding of how much money did this campaign add, incrementally, and that's kind of where we're at right now with attribution.
100% agree. That's also the same decision where we landed as well. Like last year, we knew that for this year's roadmap, that would be one of the most important things for us to resolve.
Yeah.
So obviously, there were some organizations that do multi-touch and like very eager to prove their point that like they can do whatever we're asking them to do, but entire organization, my core team of stakeholders that I work with, we were very clear that that was not where the future is. And frankly, it came down to kind of like looking like, well, do we do this like MMA ourselves, or like do we actually like go with a vendor that can help us with the incrementality? And that was the last one, is what our choice was. And I would say so far we could not have been happier with all the tests and some of the media budget shifts that we've done. We're seeing some really promising results. It's been just like a few months that we've launched it, but I would say that from attribution perspective, like we've seen success, and we believe as an organization that that's where our attention should go.
Yeah, and I think the balance of one, just more maybe testing on your website, but also a mindset of test and learn is, I think, what you both have shared in conversations up here and also separately, of you just have to kind of try new things as the industry is evolving, new tools, new technologies, see what sticks, what doesn't work, and kind of be agile as a business. So maybe not majorly different than what we've already been doing in the past. Also curious to know how your reporting and visualization, if it has, how it's changed. So you're collecting more data and maybe more own data. Is that changing how you are thinking about reporting, and just what types of reports you're building?
We could take a day to talk about that. I've been trying to automate a lot of those insights since the day I started at Tory Burch, but unfortunately some of the things didn't allow us to move forward fast. But I think one of the things, like our primary focus was first, before we even jumped into building the reporting, was to like really change our entire infrastructure, underlying infrastructure that supports the storage of the customer data. Yeah. And we actually are now a Google Cloud platform owners, the clients. So, but the reason why we decided to first focus on that is if you have a broken customer data, there is no really insight you can drive on that. There is no really, you can't clean and connect the data in a way that you could hope to help your teams to make right business decisions. So having a platform and like support our customer data with its flexibility, the ability for us to like work with the massive amounts of data, like that was a big shift. And then now that we have that in place, I think the way we are really focusing on like two major areas, I would say, like one is more operational, meaning like how do we support like day-to-day decision making. Like we as an organization, especially my team, like we do a lot of like customer lifecycle tests. We run them across different channels. And we have a dedicated team that actually builds that and runs those tests. And like when you have that, you also have like a media team, you have like overall CRM programs running. Like our focus primarily has been like how do we use this to like support daily decision making and inform the teams in a way that they can like not just like freak out when they see like one day like revenue's down, but like really look at the trends and understand where we're going, right? So that trends thing brings me to the second type of the reports, which is more like what we call like executive level, right? There's only so much you can really learn if you're just so focused narrowly on like day-to-day things, but also like what are key business questions that we need to regularly be asking ourselves as a team? And when I say team, I mean really cross-functional team. It brings in analytics, it brings myself as a product, brings in like digital media and CRM and others in the room, and like try to understand like how do we need to understand overall business trends, customer trends, so that like we can inform the overall strategy. There's a lot you can do in between, but obviously like there's a lot to chew on. So it has been our decision that this would be the route we would take, at least in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So we've undergone a major transformation when it comes to reporting. We built out a new data warehouse, so we don't really have a central point of where we store all data. Right now we're collecting all of our sales data, our inventory, Google Analytics data, so multiple sources, and kind of created this central data warehouse. And it's really been a major shift in the way every one of our stakeholders do their business, right? From management down to tactical level. For example, operationally, we're looking at our warehouse process. How fast are things taking from step A to step B, and then obviously from at an executive level, intraday sales and profit, and really getting every half hour. Our data is updated every half hour, so really getting a close look at what's performing well, what's not. But really across the organization, we've kind of put the power in people's hands to be able to see what's going on, really understand their business that they didn't have before. So
awesome. Okay. So far we've spent most of the time talking about what you guys are practically doing within your organization today. So just shifting as we're closing up this conversation to forward thinking, are there technologies that you haven't explored yet that you'd like to explore? What are you excited about looking into in the next year?
There's a lot, especially the word AI comes to mind. But I think, I don't know if I can really name a specific technology, but the area that I'm most excited to understand is this identity. And the reason for that is like our customers don't have like one face they show over the internet, right? So with like cookie deprecation, like the different strategies you can deploy around owning and collecting your first party data, like building the loyalty like we've talked about, like how do you build all of that in a space where like there is more and more data being anonymized, and even if they give you the data, like there are solutions being in place, like for example, like many of you I assume own Apple iPhone, and very simple features that you have, like you can sign up for things online where you can hide your email, right? If you hide the email, how do I build the audience lists then and retarget you? Simple things like that, going all the way to much more complex strategies that you can deploy. So I think where that will go and how much the customers will take the ownership of managing their own identity. Like even a few years ago, there were companies, like I would go to conferences and like there would be like some startup talking about it in a very exciting way of like giving people the control over their data. And I was like, this is cool. But no one's really thinking in that terms, right? And over the last few years, there is a small but still a shift in people being more aware of how much they're being tracked and like how they can be more aware of that and like conscious of that. So I think as the years go by and the more technologies come into play and more the data, we will always want more data, right? And as the consumer trends also change and accelerate, that is something that I'm always thinking about and would love to kind of like stay on top of and understand how do we evolve and follow that, and like not necessarily sacrifice the KPIs on the business side as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm curious kind of to see over the next year, once third-party cookies are completely out, what solutions the industry will create, how effective they'll be, how accurate our measurement will be. Will there be loss of revenue? We talked about it, in the previous session or 2 sessions ago. So that's one thing I'm curious, just to kind of in the short term to keep an eye on, dealing with these challenges, and then in the longer term, to piggyback on your AI point. I mean, I think I'm no visionary, but we could be dealing with problems a whole lot bigger than third-party cookies when it comes to privacy with AI. So that's something I'm certainly also curious about for the long term.
Yep, absolutely. Just as we have closed out every session, do you guys have any final thoughts or advice for organizations that are in this room now of how they can be shifting and continuing to transform in a privacy-centric world?
I think if there's one thing probably that I would want everyone to take away, or maybe like 2 things, is, and we've talked about that before, probably like 3 times, and I'm going to say it again. No one has it really figured out. And I think like same point of like transformation being a big word, like understanding that it's okay to like learn, like hold hands with your teammates and learn and understand and raise your hand and ask questions and figure this thing out together, educate each other. I think it's very, very important. I'm very like fortunate that I have a pretty vast network of people who are in this space, like working different industries, and like I swear no one knows the answer, like no matter how high up they are or how experienced they are. And it just proves the point that like we can all learn together, and there is no company that can like really put a framework and be like, this is the way everybody should be doing it. No. And the second thing that I will go back to my very first answer to your question, because I've seen a tremendous benefit of it. Like if you really want to evolve in a smarter way and not find yourself in a situation where like, what do we do now? Partnering with your data and privacy team and like really bringing them early on along the way in the conversations you were having internally or the things you were working on, I think can have a tremendous impact and can also save you a lot of headache down the road. So those will be my 2 things.
Yeah, for me, I'm just kind of repeat what's been said today, which is try to be kind of ahead of things, at least educate yourself, keep on top of changes as best as possible, as fast changing as they are. The other tip I would say is a company like InfoTrust is, kind of a thought leader in the space, and lean on them, or companies like that are really, kind of really keeping on top of the fast changing regulatory changes and policies. So.
Did they pay you to tell us?
I'll get you your money afterward. Thank you both so much. That was a great way to close today out. And we really appreciate that you shared practically what you've been doing. We've heard so many awesome ideas today, and it's always great to kind of get the perspective of people who are on the ground floor working out those ideas. So really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Courtney.
Pleasure.
Thank you.